You're listening to Your Magical Midlife. This podcast is for women who are seekers, dreamers, and out-of-the-box thinkers. If you're a Gen X woman who never quite fit in, and probably never will, listen up. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and coach, and I'm here to guide you through the expansive, exhilarating, and sometimes exhausting crossroads that we find ourselves in at midlife. Whether you're a seasoned listener or just joining the adventure, think of this podcast as your hot pink convertible cruising down the highway of change. Together we'll navigate the sometimes baffling backroads of midlife and collect all the cool souvenirs along the way. Get in and buckle up. Our map may have flown out the window miles ago, but that doesn't mean we aren't going to have a blast. Let's hit the road and discover the magic just around the bend. Wiley Women is a wellness brand that wants you to live your best midlife. Developed by a naturopath, they offer tinctures, supplements, and drink mixes. Wiley uses plant medicine and clinical studies to demystify and embrace the hormonal powers and hidden complexities of grown women from the inside. Female formulated and female founded. Plus, they offer free shipping and easy returns. I love the Unworried tincture, which has bacopa, holy basil, passion flower, and reishi. It helps calm my body and stops the spinouts. It reduces jitters and lightens my mood. Go to www.wileywomen.com and use code KATEH2O at checkout to get 20% off. That's www.wileywomen.com and use code KATEH2O for 20% off. It's Perimenopause Awareness Month, and I have to admit I've been avoiding talking about the entire subject of perimenopause and menopause for the most part on this podcast. And when I think about why, I realize I still am processing a lot of shame around being older, around aging, around being in menopause myself, around surgical menopause, which I experienced, all of it. And I think it's time to really start unpacking all of that shame. And I think I'm going to start with doing it right here on the podcast. So I noticed that my body was changing around the time I turned 40. I remember I woke up on my 40th birthday and I had my period. And I was alarmed because my period was a little bit early. And I was already worrying about turning 40, turning 45, turning 50. Being at the end of my youth really freaked me out. I lived in New York for my entire adult life, and specifically in New York City. And in New York City, I think in probably all of the big urban areas, but specifically New York, LA, maybe Chicago, maybe Boston. I don't know. I haven't lived in those cities. I can only really speak about living in New York. You can be lulled into a really long, extended adolescence. And I was. I was pulled into youth culture for a very, very long time. I identified as a young person. I was a nightlife performer. I did young things, dressed young, acted young, and I really believed on some level that I was always going to feel that way. I was always going to feel like there was just endless possibilities for me. And then as my body started to shift and change in my upper 30s, I started to have serious panic. But I didn't identify exactly what it was connected to. I just noticed that I had a general uptick in anxiety. And then on my 40th birthday, like I said, I woke up and I got my period unexpectedly. And I was going to have brunch with my parents that morning. And my mother was a nurse, and I called her. And even though we don't talk about bodies in my family much at all, I said to her, Mom, I got my period and it was only 3 weeks since my last period. And isn't that weird? And what I expected her to say was, don't worry, you're just stressed out. You're turning 40 is a big deal. It's probably just stress. You'll be fine, which is what I wholeheartedly had anticipated that she would say. What she said was, I went into menopause very early, and you should know that. And I said, how early? And she said, 45. And I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach because I was really still on the fence, honestly, about wanting to have a baby. And I know that sounds so ridiculous at this point. But again, I lived in New York. Specifically, I lived in Brooklyn. More specifically than that, if this makes any sense to you, if you're listening, for wherever you are in the world, I lived in a neighborhood in Brooklyn called Park Slope. Park Slope was, when I moved in, was a hippy-dippy neighborhood. By the time I got priced out of Park Slope, it had been stroller roller central. It was filled with wealthy finance people, bankers, lawyers, professionals who made a lot more money than I did, so I got pushed out. But it was very common for women to have children in their early 40s. What I didn't really understand, and I should have, is that the reason why those women were able to have children in their late 30s, early 40s, maybe even up to 45, was because they had access to expensive medical procedures that allow women to get pregnant at that age if they aren't just really genetically lucky. Because some women really are. Some women are able to have babies up until like 45 naturally, but those women are very rare. And you're more likely to be able to get pregnant in your 40s if you've already had a bunch of kids. So when you see a woman who has a religious background, who's having kids from the time that she's 18 until she goes into menopause, that's because she's always in the cycle of having a baby, nursing the baby, getting the baby to a certain point, having another baby, nursing the baby, getting that baby to a certain point, having another baby. So those women tend to have like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 children. That's why they're able to do that, because they're constantly pregnant. For most women, you can't afford that. That's not your life. That's not your desire, right? So if you wait until you're in your mid-30s to even start thinking about having a baby, probably, unless it just runs in your family that everybody has their kids 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, you're probably going to need some reproductive assistance. And that is something that I didn't even really think of. I thought I would be able to get naturally pregnant at 42, 41, somewhere in there, which is when I was really thinking I would be financially ready, emotionally ready, spiritually ready. So I stuck my head in the sand and I didn't much think about it. And I was having a lot of fun. I really wasn't all that serious about my career. I had a career for sure. I was definitely working in a psychiatric hospital, on a mobile crisis team, at a university. I was doing all these serious jobs, but I was also having a lot of fun. And I didn't really much think about aging, not being able to have a baby. None of those things were really on my mind. So when my mother said that she had gone through menopause at like 45, I was really unhappy about that. And then I really had to start to think about what my future was. And spoiler alert, I never did have a baby. And spoiler alert, it's taken me a long time to reconcile that. Perimenopause really kicked in for me around the time I was 42, 43. And it started with my period just becoming increasingly unstable, moving around. It would go from like 25 days to 28 days to 32 days to 36 days, back down to 28 days, 26 days. And this happened for a couple of years. I also noticed a spike in my anxiety. My sleep got really bad. When I was in my upper 40s, 47, 48, that's when the hot flashes and night sweats started to happen. That's when I got a little bit of a tummy that I had a hard time losing. That's when no matter what I ate, I couldn't bounce back to a smaller size. I was still eating healthy or even more healthy than I had. I was still exercising every day, and just everything just started to change. And I remember feeling a deep sense of shame. Shame is the only word that I can really pull from here. It was like I was really embarrassed. And I didn't want the man I was seeing to know that this was happening to me. I don't know why I felt like I had to minimize this, cover this up, hide this from him. I didn't want him to see me differently. I wanted him to see me as young and sexy and fun and filled with possibilities. And to me, being postmenopausal meant there are no possibilities for you. You're done. You're frumpy. You're old. You're over. There's nothing more for you. And of course, you're going to be discarded for somebody younger. Of course, you're going to be. Because I didn't even think about what was happening to his body, how his body was changing, how his attitudes were changing, how his belief system was changing, how he was changing on every level. Perimenopause is the gateway. It's a gateway. It's a portal. It's a portal between your old self and your new self. And you have to walk through fire to get there. And it's a transformation. There's a reason why they call it the change, because it changes you in every way, spiritually, emotionally, physically, intellectually, every way. I have been massively transformed in the last decade. I don't see anything the same that I did in my 30s. It's really wild. It's a crazy thing I didn't really think was going to happen. The best part for me is that I'm finally past the shame. The shame was really hard for me because I really projected onto my partner that he wouldn't want me, that he would be bored with me, that I would be discarded, that he would be disgusted by me. I'm actually going to admit that I really thought that he would look at me and feel disgust. Now, meanwhile, this is the man that drove me home from my hysterectomy. This is the man that washed my feet that night when we got back from the hospital. I don't know why he washed my feet, but he did. He washed my face. He washed my hands. He washed my feet. He wrapped me in a blanket, and then he brought me something to eat. I can't remember. I was so doped up. I think he brought me an avocado and some toast and maybe some ice cream. But anyway, he settled me on the couch. He got me all settled, situated. He put something on. I don't even remember what it was. He gave me my opiates. He gave me my snack. And I slept for like 3 days after that. It was really a thing. And I remember crying in the car on the way home. And I remember crying 2 days before my surgery because his brother who is a minister, came to counsel me, which was very generous of him. And he prayed over me, which was a very strange experience because I don't consider myself a Christian, but I allowed the love to happen for me. And I remember sitting there with my eyes closed and feeling his hand on my back and my partner's hand on my back, and just feeling their love, their very loving presence on me. And it really helped carry me through that surgery. And it also made me know that I could trust him to still love me, even as I age. That was really what I got hung up on, is whether or not I was still going to have anything to offer, if I was still going to be lovable, if I was still going to be who I was. And you know what? I'm not. I'm not who I was. But I am something not better. I'm something different. I'm stepping into this new part of myself, this more powerful part of myself, this less people-pleasing part of myself. I'm walking away from the behaviors where I had to make sure everybody else was okay before I was. I'm walking away from the anxiety about whether or not I'm good enough for someone's friendship, someone's love, someone's affection, someone's approval. I am fully walking away from that, and I feel myself getting further from it every day that goes by. Perimenopause is going to kick your ass. It really is. It's going to change every perspective that you have, but you are going to get through it, and you're going to get to the other side of it, and you're going to be okay. The hot flashes are not great. The night sweats are not great. The anxiety is not great. If you are able to, and you have a good doctor, and there are no medical contraindications, I would highly recommend that you explore HRT, because it helped me with all those physical symptoms that were very bothersome. It helped my mood. It helped my joint pain. It's helped my sleep. I feel a little bit better. Perimenopause is that bell going off that tells you, girl, you got to take care of yourself. Girl, you got to fix your life. Girl, it is time to pay attention. It is telling you to pay attention to yourself. Your life is worth tending to. Being young is not everything. It's okay to put it down. It's okay to walk through the gate. Step through the threshold and know that you are going to be great. We're going to pull a card for this episode. And if you have any questions about menopause, perimenopause, whether you go through it naturally, whether you go through it surgically, or like me, a little of column A, a little of column B. Let's pull a card for this episode. And I have some great guests coming up, by the way. Now that I'm getting braver, now that I'm getting ready to talk about this a little bit more, I have Holly Lamb from the No Fucks Given podcast. She's amazing. She's young. She's like in her 30s, but she's already going through perimenopause, and she and I had a great conversation. And also I'm having Dr. Fiona Lovely to talk about hormone replacement and other things. She's a cool ass lady. And the card for our episode. So be on the lookout for those interviews coming up in coming up in September and October. September is Perimenopause Awareness Month. October is Menopause Awareness Month, and World Menopause Day is October 17th. So be on the lookout for all of those things. And the card for this episode is the Four of Pentacles. That's interesting. The Four of Pentacles is about the fear of letting go. It's exactly where we are. It's the fear of passing down your knowledge, your wisdom, your abilities. It's about the younger generation taking from you and building their own life and being afraid to impart your wisdom and your knowledge. So don't be afraid. Give generously with your time your love, your resources, and your knowledge. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's the natural course of things to move forward and to move on. Become a mentor. Don't be afraid to give away what you know. And you can definitely apply that to this area of your life. It does feel like everything isn't for you anymore. Television shows aren't for you anymore. Commercials aren't about you anymore. Midlife feels like the world is kind of passing you. And you know what? First of all, it's not true. And second of all, there's a whole other world to step into. So step through the portal that is perimenopause and menopause, and know that it's all working out. Have a great week. Thank you so much for listening to Your Magical Midlife. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. You can follow me on Instagram at Your Magical Midlife. You can also check out my offerings on my website, which is www.yourmagicalmidlife.com. I offer individualized coaching for women 45 plus who are seekers, dreamers, and out-of-box thinkers. I also offer luxury retreats that include ritual, rites of passage, and ceremony for women 45 and beyond. I'd be so excited to work with you. Also, if you're feeling kind and you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star review, as it opens this podcast to a broader audience and keeps me in those pesky algorithms. Thank you so much for your partnership with me. I appreciate you. Have a great week.